Let's begin checking our posture with introspection. Make sure you have the main points of the posture, and then allow your body to rest in stillness and relaxation. Take 3 deep breaths, relaxing with each out breath. Let's set our motivation for this practice to find balance, presence, cultivate wisdom, understanding, cultivate the causes for genuine happiness. And to do it not only for our benefit, but for the benefit of those around us too. Now let your breath be natural, allowing it to settle. Without controlling it, without modifying it. Now let your mind settle in its natural state. Open your eyes a little bit, just resting in the space in front of you. Resting your gaze without focusing on anything. Notice the field of the mind and any mental events arising in this field, such as ideas, thoughts, memories, fantasies, desires, emotions. Any perceptions of the mind, allowing them to arise, dwell, and dissolve, and follow the whole process. Observe them, watch them closely, without distraction and without grasping. If we are carried away by a thought, just notice that you've been carried away and observe that same thought as your object of meditation. If there are no thoughts or mental events arising, just rest in that space of the mind until the next event arises. If you experience dullness, laxity, lack of clarity, refocus your attention on the space of the mind and notice any subtle mental events arising in that space and dissolving into that space or field. And now, while maintaining that sense of relaxation, stability, and vividness, let's reflect about our precious human life. First, check if you have conditions conducive for spiritual practice. Consider the advantage of each quality and rejoice if you have it. And think of how to gain it if you don't. The first point is, are you free from unfortunate states? Do you have a human body and human intelligence? Are your sense and mental faculties healthy and complete? Do you live at a time when a Buddha has appeared and given teachings? Do those teachings still exist in a pure form? Do you live in a place where you have access to them? Have you committed any of the 5 heinous actions which obscure the mind and make practice difficult? Those are killing one's father, mother, or an arhat, drawing blood from a Buddha's body, or causing a schism in the Sangha. Are you naturally interested in spiritual practice? Do you have instinctive belief in things worthy of respect, such as ethics, the path to enlightenment, compassion, and the Dharma? Do you have a supportive group of spiritual friends who encourage your practice and who act as good examples? Do you have the material conditions for practice, such as food, clothes, and so forth? Do you have access to qualified spiritual teachers who can guide you along the correct path? Now, recognizing that you have a precious human life, or you're very close to have one, let's reflect on the purpose and opportunity of having this precious human life. What does it mean to you to live a meaningful life? To what extent are you doing that now? How could you make your life more meaningful? Consider the purpose of having a precious human life. Temporary goals within cyclic existence, we have the ability to create the causes for happy rebirths in the future and achieve these temporary goals. But also ultimate goals. We have the ability to attain liberation and enlightenment. That is, to be free of all problems and capable of helping others effectively. we can make each moment of our lives meaningful, transforming it into the path to enlightenment by practicing thought training. We can also generate bodhicitta, the altruistic motivation, each morning, and remember it throughout the day as the motivation for everything we do. Visualize yourself living a meaningful life. Feel joyful and enthusiastic about everything you have going for you in your life. Recognize that there are many beneficial things to do in life and be enthusiastic about doing them. Feel amazed at your fortune to have this present opportunity and determined to use it well. Now let all thoughts, visualizations, dissolve back into the space of the mind. And rest in the present, without grasping, without distraction. Just rest. Let's finish dedicating the merit of this practice so that we can continue maintaining our precious human life and applying it to live a meaningful life that can benefit the world and other sentient beings. And stretch a little bit and come back. So we've reached the path of the level of the initial practitioner. And here we're analyzing what we have or what we need to have in order to start walking that path to freedom, to liberation, to enlightenment, right? And so the first thing to reflect on is the precious human life. If we don't have it, what can we do to obtain one, right? And so we said that a precious human life is not just a human life. It has 8 freedoms and 10 fortunes. And so these are some of these freedoms and fortunes summarized. But the thing is that there's many human lives where people cannot even think about following a spiritual path or dedicating time to meditation, study, reflection, because they have very unfavorable conditions. They're striving all the time for food, or their basic needs that are not covered. They're trying to survive. So their minds cannot even think and reflect about these things. It's kind of far or not important for them right now. or their bodies and minds might be not healthy or not in a state where they could learn, study, reflect, meditate, and apply the practice into their lives. So it's very rare to obtain a human life that is precious. According to Buddhism, the reason we have a precious human life now is because we cultivated the causes in the past. Even though we might not remember, these causes are keeping pure ethics and abandoning the destructive actions. So, at some point in our past, we kept pure ethics, and that's why now we have a precious human life. But that doesn't mean we will have one in the future. If we start acting unethically and doing destructive actions, we are creating the causes to lose our precious human life. Another of the causes is practicing the far-reaching attitudes, or paramitas, also called perfections. We will meditate on all of them, but they are practicing generosity, patience, ethical discipline, perseverance, concentration, and wisdom, right? And also making prayers to be able to have a precious human life and practicing the Dharma. So the reason we have a precious human life now is that we did lots of aspirations in the past to have a precious human life. And we, in the same way, we can do these things with kind of the initial motivation of having like a good life in the future. So it's kind of selfish because we are still within cyclic existence, wanting to have a better rebirth or a better life. And then with that motivation, we practice ethics, we make aspirations, we practice generosity, patience, etc. But it's better than having an unethical life and destructive actions, right? But we could have a higher motivation than that, and then entering the path of the middle or the higher practitioner. But for now, it's important to know what are the causes and know that it's very rare. So in Buddhism, there is this kind of metaphor of how difficult it is to obtain a precious human life. And it's like they say is as probable as having a tortoise under the sea and coming out into the surface once every 100 years. And imagine a golden ring floating on the ocean, and that tortoise coming out at the same time the ring is passing and putting its head through that ring, right? And that's the probability we have to get a precious human life. But sometimes there is kind of an extension of this metaphor. So imagine the tortoise coming into the ring, and that's us, coming in contact with the teachings, with the environment that can help us be free, be liberated forever from suffering, from samsara, from cyclic existence, from all our problems, gain great wisdom, find our true nature, that which we've been searching since beginningless time. And then just not grabbing the ring, but just letting it go and going down into the ocean again. And waiting another 100 years to come out and see if the ring passes. Well, that's even more difficult, right? So that happens to many of us. We kind of start studying Dharma or with Dharma, I'm not referring only to the Buddhist Dharma. I mean, the collection of teachings that can lead you to freedom and liberation. And you study a little bit, you practice here, you go to one retreat, then you forget, you spend years working and trying to get success and money and all these material goals. And you're thinking, well, there will be time. In the future, I will practice. Yeah, I want to go to that retreat, but I can't do it now. Yeah? I will do it in the future. And then you let your life just slip by to vanish without practicing, without doing anything, without living that meaningful life you wanted to live. And then the end of our lives comes, we're dying, and we regret not having used this opportunity to practice. And we say, well, maybe in the next life I will have time to practice. Well, that's even more difficult. You don't know if you will have a precious human life. And if all you did was cultivating anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, you're probably not going to get a precious human life. So now is the opportunity to practice, and it's never too late to start. As soon as you realize that you have a precious human life, take that opportunity, right? And start practicing right away. There's another story about a very old man coming to see the Buddha because he had all his life had working and his family. He was busy, right? But then he was very old and suddenly he was retired and he had this sudden wish to follow a spiritual path. So he said maybe it's not too late, but he was like 90 years old, something like that. So he came to see the Buddha, but he couldn't find him. He found some of his disciples that were very advanced on the path, but they were not Buddhas yet. And he said, I want to join the Sangha. The Sangha is a community of practitioners. At that time, the Sanghas were mostly composed by monks, or later also bhikkhunis, nuns, right? But at that time, joining the Sangha and follow spiritual path implied to take vows and join the spiritual community of monks. So he came and said, I want to join. And the disciples of the Buddha said, you're too old. There's no point for you to start practicing now. Just make prayers that as soon as you die, you can get a new life. And then with a young, new body, you can start practicing and maybe you can achieve something, but you're too old. So they kind of rejected him. And he was very sad. And he just sat there and cried. But then the Buddha came by, and he saw him. He said, come, old man, I will give you ordination. And he told the disciples that he had karmic imprints from the past, and that if he wanted to practice at that age, that was okay. And this man practiced very intensely, and he became an arhat. He achieved the level of an arhat in that lifetime. So it's never too late. The important thing is to value that we have this precious human life and use it in the best possible way. And here, if you see in this meditation, we reflected in that you can use it to have temporary goals. There's nothing wrong with that. And to have some happiness in the relative realm. But we can use it for a higher purpose, for achieving enlightenment and to be completely free. So that would be the highest purpose, right, for this precious human life that is so rare and difficult to get. And that now we have, and we give it for granted. So if we're really conscious about impermanence, we would take care of this life and use it in the best possible way to make a good impact in the world, to help others, to tame our minds, our mental afflictions, be of benefit when we can, and be conscious and aware of our actions of body, speech, and mind, and the karma we are generating for the future, right? So it's important to meditate on the precious human life every day, because that's really transformative. It has a powerful transformative effect on our mind, and that's why it's one of the 4 mind changings, or the 4 thoughts that orient the mind towards liberation, that put us in that direction. So we will do a meditation with all the 4, but for now it's important to go in detail into what a precious human life is. Okay? Any question? Comment? No?
I have a question, but it's actually related to the taking the path as the settling into the natural state of the mind. So, what is your perspective on using this mindful noting within this practice?
The what?
This noting tool, like in the Theravada tradition, especially in the Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw tradition, there is to help us identifying the mental events, we use noting, which is actually, I use it personally, it helps me, especially when the clarity is a little bit confused. But in the end, that is a kind of a grasping, because you kind of identify, name it, the events. So how is this compatible with this technique, with the resting in the space of the mind?
Well, you already answered your question, but there's some traditions that use this method of labeling or noting. And like if a pain arises, to mentally say pain, or if a thought arises, thought, emotion. Label everything you're perceiving, right? And it can help kind of calm the mind, because we're giving it a job. Our mind is constantly creating thoughts and have this internal chit-chat dialogue, commenting all the time, right? This little voice talking in our mind. And it's like giving a job. It's similar to the method of counting breaths. You count 1 to 10 and start over, or 1 to 21, or 1 to 100. And labeling each breath might help the conceptualization decrease and be more calm, because you're giving it a job. Yet, it's kind of using crutches, for walking. So eventually, we'll have to let go of that method or technique, because we don't want to be conceptualizing and doing a work. We want to let go of grasping, as you said. So if you can, from the very beginning, do it without it, is best. Because we habituate to something, and then changing it is difficult. If you have habituated to watching your breath at the abdomen, and then you want to move to the nostrils, it takes some time, because your mind tends to go to the abdomen, because you've been training it to do that, right? So you can use it sometimes if you see your mind is very conceptual, a lot of agitation, but it's not really taught within this practice of settling the mind, and it's best not to do it, right? But it's up to you. If you find it meaningful and helpful to use it sometimes, it's okay too. Anything else? Well, if you notice this practice of settling the mind in its natural state, the most important thing is to do it without grasping and without distraction, right? So, see the thought arise, see the thought dissolve, without doing anything but watching. You're not repressing thoughts, you're not pushing them away. Yes?
I feel like I can't really see the thought. I just get into it and then I remember that it's okay, I need to come back.
That's the practice. That's the practice. We will, by habit, get caught up in the content and then release it and observe it. And then again, but as you practice more and more, you will notice you saw a thought from the very beginning without grasping, and you saw it dissolve. But sometimes you're carried by the wave, by the contents, right? And then you notice and you release it. But we are alert. Maybe we will catch another one from the very beginning. So just practice and practice, and that will become easier. Yeah, Alma?
Yeah, just also wanted to say that it's much easier for me to notice the sensations of the body and let them go, they come and go, they come and go. But the thoughts, it's like what Adu said, it's more tricky.
It's more tricky. So practice, we need a little practice in order to see the difference with mindfulness of breathing. At the beginning it can feel like, oh, mindfulness of breathing is so easy, I just have to watch my breath or the sensations in the body, right, arising through the breath. And this, I can't find the mind, I can't find my thoughts, I can't find my emotions. Although we're always trapped in them, somehow now it feels like we can't identify them. But with a little bit of practice, it becomes easier, and it's a very interesting practice that can help you make a lot of progress and also gain a lot of insight into your own mind. Now, we have in the West a lot of therapies, right? And we think when you have a problem or an emotional distress or a suffering, we think, let's go to the therapist or to the psychologist, right? And what do we do in these therapies and this psychoanalysis, all these things? We go and we talk about our problem and our childhood and what we lived, and then we try to find the cause for that problem or that suffering that we're having, and then work through it, and kind of it's a process of kind of trying to understand our personal history and trying to understand the causes. And sometimes that detonates more suffering, but in the process of speaking about it and this free association, we start putting it together and finding some relief or some peace, right? And there's nothing wrong with going to therapy or the psychologist. I mean, I love psychology. I did a master's in psychology. I tried psychoanalysis for many years and all kinds of therapies. I like psychology, but somehow it's like reifying your personal history and saying, this is me, and I'm the result of these situations I lived in my childhood, and kind of going into the content, you see? But when we meditate in settling the mind, we're doing something different. We're bypassing all of that sentient being we are, with our personal history, sufferings, traumas, all of that. And we don't care about the contents. We're just making the subconscious conscious, yes, but we're allowing it to arise and dissolve, arise and dissolve. And in that process, there is a lot of healing too. Now, therapy has its place. Sometimes we can't meditate if we haven't worked with that trauma or that emotional situation we're dealing with. And it's best to take some years or some months of therapy and then start meditating or doing it at the same time, right? But when we do settling the mind, we're not concerned about the contents. So because we're doing this practice and watching our mind, we might start remembering things that we didn't remember that were under the surface, like they were subconscious, they were repressed, or we might have emotions coming up, all kinds of things, right? Because we are kind of steering and watching everything arise and pass. So the thing is, if we don't get caught in the content, we allow that mind to settle into a deeper state of consciousness that is clear and peaceful and is not defined by that personal story and that those concepts we have about who we are and what we've lived and what we deserve or don't deserve. Like that story we tell ourselves continuously of who we are and our limitations and our problems. It just takes another dimension because we see it as a relative dream, you know. And that is very helpful to find freedom and peace. But the moment we identify and reify those thoughts or those memories coming, well, they can steer a lot of things, right? So we just have to keep that openness of being watching the movie without getting entangled in the story. And it can be difficult because we are used to getting entangled with our own story. But with practice, we can do it. Okay? Yes?
So when earlier we did this practice of watching the mind, I kept on running into the sense that myself watching the mind was just another thought. You know? So it felt a little bit like a dog chasing its own tail.
Yeah, we have that question coming up a lot because we start doing that, like who is thinking, and then you can go ad infinitum, right? Watching, like when we see mirrors after mirrors reflecting each other, and then we see to the infinite. So that's a good insight because you're kind of starting to question who is the observer, who is the thinker, right? But that's more in the realm of vipassana. When we do the third application of mindfulness to the mind, we will start investigating this. And we will also do another shamatha practice where we take that observer as the object and forget about the space of the mind and the events even. So just be patient, we will get there. But if you're doing settling the mind, don't get distracted by that. Just notice that you had the thought who is watching the thought, and watch that thought arise and dissolve, okay? And if it comes again, watch it again, okay? But not intentionally trying to analyze and find out. But we will do very soon some meditations that actually are going in that direction. Yes?
I have a question. Actually, I asked it in the morning, but still I feel like I want to ask again. Like in each moment, it connects to what Liam said in the morning, that each moment has its like own reality. I mean, it doesn't change. Each moment is real in a sense. So I feel like in each new moment there is a self that is operating, someone who is operating, and I mean, not the self. I understand that like we tell ourselves a story about who we are, and we can fabricate it in different ways. But in the present moment, there is someone who is operating, and like this sense of self. I mean, can we get over it, or are we supposed to get over it?
Well, in a relative sense, there is a self, right? We have a label upon this body and mind, this psychophysical matrix that is in constant change, but relatively we're labeling I. And that self, is there arising in the present and dissolving and giving rise to a new sense of self, right? But eventually, through practice, we want to dissolve that grasping to a solid self. Not a healthy sense of self that we know we're putting that label for practical purpose to operate in this relative reality. But ultimately, know our true nature, which is we're empty of self. And that's what is there is just the wisdom of knowing that, So, Kalu Rinpoche had a nice way of saying this, or a nice phrase that relates to this. He said that by knowing that you are nothing, you come to the conclusion that you are everything. You will end up realizing that you are everything. So when we dissolve this sense of personal self, not the relative, healthy self, but the grasping to the separated self that is separated from all the universe. It's like that cup we were talking about that had a space inside, and we say, this is me, and the space outside is not me. When we break that cup, then there's no difference. It's the same space, right? So we become free of those constructs, of that reification, that solidification that makes us suffer. Because if we are an independent, solid ego, this self that is separated from everything else, we feel so lonely. And then we perceive the world as a very aggressive place where we need to protect ourselves, defend from everything, be chasing after those pleasurable things, be running away from those dangers and obstacles and distressing things. But if we realize that we are creating the dream, and that the dream and the dreamer are not different, then we become free, and then we can be lucid in the dream and dream whatever we want, right? So I hope this answered your questions, but the next meditations might help more, okay? One more and then we go.
So, still with settling the mind into the space, what really to do with this undercurrent, this mental undercurrent, this, subtle thoughts, I think it's called in Buddhism, like these proto-thoughts, these just little snippets of not really developed ideas and thoughts, but this constant current because we really can't control, this is just operating all the time, so it's not really, it is arising and passing, I guess, but it's more like some river flowing beneath this more tangible thought. What to do with that when we perceive it?
The same, we are noticing all mental events arising and passing. And as your mind starts settling, first we see the coarse thoughts, very formulated ideas. We're caught up in the content. Then we kind of separate and say, I was thinking that. I didn't know I was fusioned with the thought or with the emotion. Now I can observe it and it's passing and dissolving. It's very coarse, right? But as we do this practice and start settling, then they become more fleeting, more small thoughts coming and going, and then you might start noticing this undercurrent of continuous chit-chat, continuous thinking, and also you can notice there are some ideas that they are about to get formulated, but they kind of dissolve back into space. They don't quite form yet into a thought. They're just like a little impulse, right? So you start seeing this ocean of mental events happening in the space. The space of the mind becomes like a very rich place where there's all these things coming and going. So you're just watching, and you're seeing that undercurrent. By being aware of all these things happening in that current of thought, but without grasping, without distraction, the mind eventually will settle. Where will it settle? It will settle into the substrate. The substrate is this flow, this continuum we talk about that passes from life to life to life. So on the superficial coarse level, we have the coarse mind, the individual psyche with our personal history, our gender, all this grasping, this chit-chat, this conceptualization, duality, right? Then we have, when we settle in meditation, we access the substrate consciousness, which is less dualistic, still a bit dualistic, but there is this river of moments of consciousness that flows from life to life, that passes from one life to another one, carrying the seeds of karma. This consciousness doesn't have a gender. We've taken a lot of forms. We take different forms in the dream. Then we wake up, we identify with this form we currently have. But it's more subtle, right? And so when we settle there, there will be these three qualities of non-conceptuality, of bliss, and clarity, right? Now, when the mind settles, the thoughts will be very subtle and there will be gaps in between thoughts. But there will always be mental events arising and dissolving, because that's the nature of the mind, is to generate thoughts, right? So one metaphor is that it's like an ocean. And the ocean has these waves. And it seems like we could label the waves and the ocean like two different things. But they're actually the same thing in a way. Those waves are made of ocean water, right? Then arise, they can steer everything and take you on a trip, but then they dissolve back into the ocean. So as we settle, it's as if we're going deep into the bottom of the ocean where it's peaceful and calm, but we're seeing the waves still on the surface coming and going, but they don't disturb us anymore. So we're not carried away by them. Okay? So just keep doing the practice like that, observing without grasping and without distraction. Okay? And if there are gaps in between those thoughts, rest in that gap. Now, at the beginning it might seem there are more gaps because you're not aware of all that undercurrent. But as you go deeper, you will see maybe there are no gaps because it's a non-stop flow of continuous thinking. But eventually, as the mind settles, you will start seeing gaps there too. So we will go into more detail about this process in the Shamatha practice and what is happening in each one of these stages, okay? So, thank you.